Rip. The sound cut through the quiet bank lobby. Her paycheck torn in half right at the counter. That smirk. Those indifferent stares. Then she looked up at the bank's television screen running their newest ad campaign. The child's face in that commercial was her son. The whole lobby froze. Don't turn away now. This story doesn't end with, sorry for the inconvenience. Stay to see how they slap themselves and comment where you're watching from. Subscribe to Black Stories Box for justice with a notification bell. My name's Marcus Reynolds, and I've seen some things in my 47 years on this planet. But what happened at First Capital Trust last Thursday, that's the kind of real-world justice you rarely get to witness in person. It was a regular afternoon at the downtown branch, the kind of place with too much marble and not enough staff. The lobby gleamed with that particular corporate shine that's supposed to make you feel like your money is in good hands. Classic portraits of founding fathers hung on walls, security cameras blinked silently from corners, and the low hum of climate control provided a soundtrack to financial transactions. I was waiting to speak with a loan officer about refinancing my condo, killing time scrolling through my phone. The woman who walked in didn't stand out at first, just another customer in a simple but professional outfit, her hair in neat braids, carrying a leather portfolio that had seen better days. She had that focused look of someone who had scheduled this errand into a busy day. I wouldn't have paid attention except for how the atmosphere shifted when she approached the counter. The teller, a blonde woman with a practiced customer service smile, seemed to tense up instantly. Her name tag read Brittany Miller, and something about her posture screamed, "I've already made up my mind about you. I'd like to deposit this check, please," the woman said, sliding a check across the counter, along with her ID. Her voice was measured, professional, someone used to navigating spaces where she wasn't always welcome. "And where did this check come from?" Brittany asked, examining it with exaggerated scrutiny, holding it up to the light like she was checking for watermarks on a $100 bill. "It's a payment for freelance work," the woman Jasmine Turner, I'd learn later, replied evenly. She stood straight, neither apologetic nor confrontational. Brittany raised an eyebrow. "We need to verify funds for checks like these. You understand, we're just protecting the system." The emphasis on protecting carried an implication that made me glance up from my phone. Something in her tone didn't sit right. That's when I noticed the kid with the vintage camera hoodie live streaming his coffee run on his phone. He'd stopped outside camera, inadvertently capturing the bank counter through the glass doors as he narrated something about the cafe across the street. Just another Gen Z content creator accidentally documenting what was about to unfold. "I've been banking here for 6 years, Jasmine said, still calm. "You can verify my account history." She gestured toward the computer terminal where her information was presumably displayed. What happened next was so unexpected that the entire lobby seemed to freeze. Brittany smiled, not the customer service smile, but something uglier, and tore the check in half. The sound was sharp, deliberate. Rip. "This check appears suspicious," she said, dropping the torn pieces into the trash bin behind her counter. "We're required to reject potentially fraudulent items." An elderly woman with a walking cane thumped it hard against the floor. The sound thok drew everyone's attention, and her glare toward the teller could have melted steel. Several customers shifted uncomfortably. I heard whispers. "Probably a bad check anyway, and they're just doing their job." A businessman in an expensive suit suddenly found his phone fascinating while a college student with headphones removed one earbud, sensing the tension. The security guard, a Hispanic man with military posture named Dominic Rodriguez, according to his badge, moved closer, maintaining order while clearly struggling with what he'd just witnessed. His hand rested lightly on his belt, not threatening but present. That's when it happened. The large television screen mounted above the waiting area switched to the bank's newest commercial, a heartwarming spot about financial futures, featuring diverse families. And there, smiling while holding a piggy bank with the First Capital Trust logo, was a young black boy with the same wide eyes and dimpled smile as Jasmine. "We see you," the slogan promised in gleaming letters. "Yeah, they see you. They see your image, not your humanity." Jasmine didn't scream, didn't make a scene. She simply took out her phone and methodically photographed the counter, the television screen, the wall clock timestamping the moment, and then reaching over when Brittany stepped aside, retrieved the torn check pieces from the trash bin and placed them in a small Ziploc bag she pulled from her purse. The elderly woman with the cane muttered, "That child in the poster is Elijah. I've signed more checks than these kids have birthdays." Have you ever experienced policy turning into attitude? Comment policy below. The branch manager emerged from his office, drawn by the tension in the lobby. His name badge identified him as Richard Barnes, and everything about him, from his perfectly knotted tie to his practiced neutral expression, screamed damage control. He'd clearly mastered the art of appearing concerned without actually committing to anything. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, addressing Brittany rather than Jasmine. His body language already sided with his employee, creating an invisible wall. "This customer is attempting to deposit a suspicious check." Brittany explained her tone, suggesting she'd heroically prevented a major fraud. She gestured toward the trash bin as if the evidence was safely disposed of and the matter resolved. The kid outside Kevin Chen, according to his livestream banner, had noticed the commotion and was now deliberately angling his stream toward the bank's interior. His viewers were multiplying. The counter in the corner of his screen jumped from 89 to over 500 minutes. The comments section was exploding, with reactions ranging from outrage to skepticism. "We reserve the right to refuse transactions that don't meet our verification standards," Richard stated as if reading from a manual. He maintained eye contact with Jasmine, but kept a professional distance, his hands clasped in front of him. Jasmine remained composed, opening a folder to produce additional documentation, her ID business EIN for her bakery, Sweet Foundations, and prior account statements. She laid them out methodically on the counter, not rushing but not hesitating either. "I don't need special treatment," she said clearly. "I just need the same process applied as listed, right there." She pointed to the poster beside the television screen that promised banking made equal in elegant typography over diverse handshakes. Richard's strategy shifted as he realized this wasn't going to be a simple removal situation. "The check appears to have irregular features," he suggested, though he hadn't actually examined it. "If you continue to disrupt business, we may need to ask you to leave the premises." The implied threat hung in the air. A young couple waiting for a mortgage consultation exchanged uncomfortable glances. A woman in scrubs checked her watch and decided to stay despite being clearly late for something. The elderly woman, Margaret Walker, according to the deposit slip she was clutching, pointed directly at the television screen. "That's Elijah. The bank is using his image in their We See You campaign." Her voice carried firm and clear despite her years. "I recognize that smile anywhere." The lobby's murmur grew louder. The livestream viewer count ticked upward, now passing 1000. Comments flooded in. "What's happening? Did she just tear up her check? Is that her kid on the ad?" Jasmine pulled out her phone and, without raising her voice, composed an email to support@firstcapitaltrust.com with preserved evidence notice in the subject line. She CC'd the Office of the Ombudsman, making sure her screen was visible to those nearby. "One CC light as a check, before it gets ripped." Richard attempted to regain control of the narrative. "Miss Turner, perhaps we can discuss this in my office. I prefer to stay here where there are witnesses," Jasmine replied, her voice steady. She didn't raise it, but the implication was clear. What happened in private offices stayed in private offices. Dominic approached cautiously, his training clearly at odds with his instincts. After assessing the situation, he did something unexpected. He requested permission to secure the trash bin containing the torn check fragments, placing security tape across it and marking the time. "Standard evidence preservation," he explained when Richard started to object. "Bank policy for disputed transactions." He cited chapter and verse from the security manual, leaving Richard momentarily speechless. Kevin, still live streaming from just outside the glass doors, suddenly looked down at his phone with surprise. "Someone just DM'd me saying this branch has a quota for rejecting handwritten checks from high-risk profiles," he announced loud enough for the growing audience to hear. "Is that even legal?" Richard's face tightened. "That's absolutely false," he insisted, but his eyes darted toward Brittany, who suddenly found her computer screen fascinating. The tell was subtle but unmistakable. There was truth to the allegation. Margaret shifted her weight on her cane. "I worked at First National for 37 years, she announced. "We never tore up checks, even suspicious ones. We'd place a hold, but destruction of documents," she shook her head. "That's not banking, that's intimidation." Several customers nodded in agreement. The mood in the lobby was shifting, tensions rising as the reality of what they'd witnessed sank in. "I'll need to speak with regional management," Richard conceded, recognizing he was losing control of the situation. "If you'll just wait, I've already contacted them," Jasmine replied, holding up her phone to show the email sent, "and I've preserved the evidence." She patted the Ziploc bag containing the torn check pieces. A mother with 2 children whispered to her partner, "That could have been me last month when I tried to deposit my tax refund check." The invisible lines in the lobby were being drawn. What had started as an isolated incident was becoming a communal reckoning. The regional director arrived within 30 minutes, a sharp-dressed woman named Victoria Hammond whose heels announced her authority before she did. Her tailored suit and Bluetooth earpiece projected corporate efficiency, and her expression was carefully calibrated to acknowledge concern without admitting fault. She immediately released a statement to the growing crowd of observers. First, Capital Trust takes fraud prevention seriously. We're investigating this unfortunate misunderstanding and appreciate customer patience while we resolve the matter. The narrative was clear, suspicious, check, cautious bank, unfortunate incident, nothing to see here. Move along. 2 PR associates flanked her tablets in hand, already monitoring social media mentions and drafting damage control statements. One whispered something about contained situation and standard protocols. Jasmine's countermove was masterful in its simplicity. She pulled up a QR code on her phone that linked to a cloud drive containing photos from the scene, the torn check, the television advertisement featuring her son timestamped phone records, and the preserve evidence notice she'd sent. "I'm curious," she said, her voice steady, "who exactly protects customers from this kind of protection?" Several customers scanned the QR code, their expressions changing as they scrolled through the evidence. A businessman who had earlier seemed dismissive now frowned deeply at his phone screen. "The documentation shows a clear pattern," Jasmine continued. "And I've already received messages from 3 other customers who experienced similar treatment." She didn't elaborate on who these customers were or what evidence they provided. A tactical ambiguity that left Victoria visibly unsettled. Victoria attempted to redirect. "Let's discuss this privately in the conference room," she suggested, gesturing toward the back. "I believe transparency benefits everyone," Jasmine replied. "The issues here aren't just personal, they're systemic." A young woman in a First Capital Trust branded polo shirt, clearly an intern based on her nervous hovering, accidentally left her tablet on a counter during the commotion. The screen displayed a marketing deck titled "We See You Campaign," with a slide showing Jasmine's son Elijah holding the piggy bank. In the corner, partially visible, was a licensing agreement with some details blurred for privacy. Sophia Barrett, according to her name tag, realized her error too late. Victoria quickly retrieved the tablet, but not before several people, including me, had noticed. Sophia's face flushed with embarrassment mixed with what looked like guilt. The evidence was mounting piece by digital piece. What had begun as one torn check was evolving into something much larger, a window into practices that usually remained hidden behind corporate walls. "Our fraud prevention protocols are designed to protect all customers," Richard attempted again, but his words rang hollow in the face of the growing evidence. A woman on the phone identified herself as Gabriela Moreno from Legal Aid Services. Jasmine had her on speaker. "Don't argue with them. Request the document destruction report and ask them to contact compliance immediately. Every financial institution is required to document the destruction of customer financial instruments." Victoria's professional veneer cracked slightly as she realized the legal implications. "We're contacting our compliance officer," she assured everyone, motioning frantically to one of her assistants. Richard tried to defuse the situation. "We can open a new account and release funds after our standard 7 to 10 Dalton's Y verification period. As a courtesy, we'll waive the new account fee. Regulation CC doesn't include tearing up checks," Jasmine replied, causing several customers who understood banking regulations to nod in agreement. "The fund's availability schedule applies to deposited items, not destroyed ones." The technical reference to banking regulations shifted the dynamic again. This wasn't an emotional customer making a scene. This was someone who understood her rights and the bank's obligations. Someone in the growing crowd of observers commented loudly, "Brittany got written up last month for her attitude with certain customers. This time she's really done it." Brittany's face flushed, but she remained silent, eyes fixed on her terminal. Victoria glanced at her with undisguised irritation. Kevin's livestream now had over 5,000 viewers, with comments flooding in faster than anyone could read them. Local news outlets were picking up the story, with reporters trying to confirm details. "Our policy is to hold questionable items, not destroy them," Victoria admitted, attempting damage control. "If procedures weren't followed, we'll address that internally." "This isn't about internal procedures," Jasmine countered. "It's about selective enforcement based on appearances." The word hung in the air: discrimination. No one had said it explicitly, but it was the elephant in the room growing larger by the minute. As the standoff continued, bank customers were divided, some left unwilling to be part of the unfolding drama, while others stayed witnesses to something they sensed was important. Through it all, Jasmine remained composed, neither raising her voice nor backing down. Her dignity in the face of indignity was perhaps the most powerful statement of all. The compliance officer arrived with remarkable speed, a stern-looking man named Benjamin Whitaker who carried a tablet and wore an expression that suggested he smelled trouble from miles away. His suit was conservative, his handshake firm, and his eyes missed nothing as he surveyed the scene. One look at the evidence, particularly the television screen, still displaying Elijah's face on the We See You campaign, and his complexion went ashen. This wasn't just a customer complaint. This was a potential regulatory nightmare. "I need to verify the source of this check," he said, his tone completely different from Richard's dismissive approach earlier. There was a gravity to his words that made everyone pay attention. Jasmine handed him a copy of the torn check she'd retrieved. "You should recognize the remitter." Benjamin examined it carefully, then looked up with an expression that combined shock and dismay. Victoria leaned over to see, and her perfect composure finally cracked. And there it was, the bombshell that changed everything. The check Brittany had torn up wasn't some questionable payment from an unknown source. It was a royalty check for using Elijah's image in the bank's own advertising campaign issued by First Capital Trust's own marketing department. The bank logo was clearly visible on the remitter line. The lobby erupted in gasps and murmurs. "Oh my God," someone whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "They tore up their own check," another asked incredulously. Benjamin immediately took charge, instructing Dominic to secure the trash bin as evidence and requesting access to the surveillance footage. The torn check pieces were carefully transferred to an evidence envelope, no longer trash but now documentation of document destruction. Richard tried to salvage the situation. Our teller was simply being vigilant about unusual items. She couldn't have known. "That's precisely the problem," Benjamin interrupted. "Assumptions were made without verification. This is exactly why we have procedures." Vigilant, I couldn't help muttering to the man standing next to me. "Fraud hasn't been found, just fraudulence." He nodded grimly. "The Emperor has no clothes and everyone can see it now." Jasmine maintained her calm methodically, reading from a document on her phone. Clause 4.2. Delays or obstruction of royalty payments by the image licensee will result in penalties of triple the original amount. She scrolled to show the contract page bearing signatures from both parties. A collective ooh rippled through the lobby. This wasn't just embarrassing for the bank, it was potentially expensive. Victoria's phone began ringing incessantly. The media line was lighting up. A hashtag was trending. We See Who. Brittany, finally grasping the magnitude of what she'd done, attempted to defend herself. "How was I supposed to know? It looked suspicious, handwritten portions, no watermark." "That's our standard royalty check format," Benjamin replied coldly. "If you'd followed verification procedures instead of making assumptions, we wouldn't be here." The atmosphere in the lobby had transformed completely. What had begun as one customer's problem was now clearly the bank's problem. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. Richard, seeing his authority crumbling, attempted one last deflection. "This appears to be an unfortunate isolated incident. Is it though?" Jasmine asked quietly, pulling up an online forum where similar experiences had been documented at various First Capital Trust branches. "Because it seems like a pattern to me." The evidence was damning, but what struck me most was how normal it had all seemed to the perpetrators. Their emails and memos discussed these practices in the bland corporate language of risk management and brand protection, as if the fundamental wrong of judging people based on appearance was just another business strategy to optimize. Benjamin's expression grew darker as he scrolled through the documentation. "This requires a full investigation," he announced, no longer concerned with the spectators. This was now officially a compliance issue, the kind that could trigger regulatory scrutiny. Victoria tried to hustle everyone to a private conference room, but the situation had progressed beyond containment. The story was already spreading beyond the bank's walls, carried by live streams, text messages, and social media. First Capital Trust was learning a hard lesson in the digital age. Injustice rarely stays private for long. The janitor, an older gentleman named Walter Thompson, who had been quietly observing while pretending to mop the same spot for 20 minutes, finally stepped forward, his mop still clutched in weathered hands. "I was cleaning the conference room during last month's training," he said, his voice soft but carrying across the now silent lobby. The slideshow said, Reduce risk focus on handwritten documents from Segment X. He produced a blurry photo taken surreptitiously with a date and time stamp. The image wasn't crystal clear, but the intent was unmistakable. Profiles had been created to target certain customers for enhanced scrutiny. The subtext was clear to everyone in the room. Walter continued his dignity, undiminished by his uniform. I've worked here 11 years, seen 5 managers come and go. Things changed 6 months ago when they started these performance metrics meetings. Victoria tried to intervene. Mr. Thompson, this isn't the appropriate forum, if not now, when Walter asked simply, and if not here where the young marketing intern Sophia was visibly distressed. The We See You campaign was specifically briefed to showcase diversity and inclusion, she explained through tears. We spent weeks finding the right families to represent our community values. But the frontline implementation has been active selective. Her admission sent ripples through the gathered crowd. The disconnect between the bank's public image and its private practices was laid bare. Kevin's still live streaming played back an audio clip where his microphone had picked up Brittany saying another policy case coming our way when Jasmine first approached the smoking gun that confirmed the differential treatment wasn't accidental. While the nation argues about interest rates, immigration, and subsidies, we can't let policy become an excuse for prejudice. Victoria attempted to contain the damage. We'd like to offer vouchers and a private apology, she said to Jasmine, and of course we'll reissue the check immediately. No, Jasmine replied firmly. I want systemic change. Not just for me, but for everyone who comes through those doors. Her refusal to be placated with token gestures resonated with the observers. This wasn't about one check anymore. It was about dignity and respect in everyday interactions. Dominic made his choice clear, providing an honest incident report and refusing suggestions to encourage the customer to leave the branch. His military background seemed to guide his ethical compass: duty to truth over duty to authority. In the Army, we had a saying he explained to a colleague who questioned his stance: integrity first. Without that, nothing else matters. Margaret approached Jasmine quietly. My grandson had the same problem last month with his VA check. They didn't tear it up, but they held it for 10 days despite the government watermark. He almost missed his rent payment. These stories began to multiply as others found the courage to speak. What had seemed like isolated incidents were revealed as points in a pattern, a system working as designed, not a bug but a feature. Victoria's carefully constructed PR response was crumbling in the face of real human experiences that couldn't be spun or minimized. The truth was messy, uncomfortable, and impossible to contain in approved talking points. Benjamin was documenting everything, his compliance training overriding any corporate loyalty. Regulations existed for a reason, and what he was witnessing violated not just company policy but potentially federal banking laws. We'll need statements from everyone involved, he announced, and I'm initiating a branch audit effective immediately. Richard looked like he'd swallowed something sour. Brittany stared at her keyboard, reality finally sinking in. The power of institutions often lies in their ability to isolate individuals to make each person's negative experience seem unique and therefore dismissible. But when those stories connect, when patterns emerge in public view, that power diminishes rapidly. Today, in this marble-floored lobby, with its inspirational posters and promotional brochures, that connection was happening in real time, and no amount of corporate damage control could stop it. A conference call with the executive team was quickly arranged. Victoria put it on speaker. Her earlier confidence evaporated completely. The phone sat on the counter, its speakerphone broadcasting the voices of people who normally remain safely distant from frontline conflicts. This is where power meets evidence. We have the regional director, branch manager, and compliance officer present. Victoria began attempting to maintain some semblance of control, as well as the affected customer. Miss Turner, a male voice, acknowledged. This is Thomas Wilson, Chief Operations Officer. I understand there's been an unfortunate incident with your transaction. The corporate understatement was almost comical given the circumstances. Jasmine didn't smile. What happened today was not an incident, she replied calmly. It was the visible symptom of a systemic problem. She outlined 3 non-negotiable conditions for resolution. First, eliminate hidden quotas for check rejections based on demographic profiles. Second, implement transparent verification procedures and prohibit document destruction without dual control and proper documentation. Third, require bias training with independent verification and establish a dedicated hotline for reporting incidents. She included specific timelines and metrics. Complaint rates must decrease by 70% within 3 months, with all reports addressed within 24 hours. The executives on the call attempted to deflect with vague assurances about reviewing procedures and taking concerns seriously, but Jasmine held firm. "I've already spoken with 3 regulatory agencies," she informed them. "They're very interested in your response." The marketing agency that had contracted Elijah's image rights called in confirming they had signed the agreement on behalf of the bank and that payment had already been issued. The bank was late in processing it. The double blow was devastating to the bank's position. "We selected Elijah's image specifically because his smile embodied the warmth we wanted to project," the agency representative explained. "The irony of this situation is profound." Brittany finally cracked, explaining how she'd lost money in a fraud scheme years ago and had overcorrected into bias. "I was just trying to protect the bank," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean to discriminate, but I guess I was looking for certain patterns." Jasmine's response was gentle but firm. "We heal fear with procedures, not contempt. What happened to you was wrong. What you did to me was also wrong. Breaking that cycle requires more than good intentions, it requires better systems." Benjamin authorized immediate action. Brittany was suspended pending investigation. Richard received a formal reprimand and a full audit of the branch was ordered. "Compliance isn't optional," he reminded everyone. "It's the foundation of banking. When we lose that, we lose everything." The executives on the call, recognizing the potential for regulatory fines and reputational damage, finally agreed to Jasmine's terms. The legal team would draw up a formal agreement by close of business. "We appreciate your constructive approach to this matter," Thomas said carefully. "Many customers would have simply taken legal action." "I'm not interested in punishment," Jasmine replied. "I'm interested in change. My son deserves to bank in a world better than the one I've experienced." The lobby erupted in soft applause, not celebrating someone's downfall, but acknowledging justice being served. "Welcome to the era of we see you for real." As the formal proceedings concluded, customers approached Jasmine sharing their own stories in hushed tones. Email addresses were exchanged, connections formed. What had begun as one woman's stand was becoming a movement. Victoria, recognizing the winds of change, made a surprising decision. "I'd like to be part of implementing these reforms," she told Jasmine. "Sometimes it takes an outsider to show us our blind spots." The humanity in that moment, the acknowledgement of fallibility and the commitment to growth was perhaps the most hopeful sign of all. 60 days later, the transformation was remarkable. First Capital Trust publicly apologized in the branch lobby, restored Jasmine's funds with triple damages as specified in the contract clause, and covered her legal expenses. But more importantly, they implemented structural changes. A new verification protocol eliminated subjective assessments, replacing them with clear, consistent standards applied to all customers regardless of appearance or account type. Document destruction required dual control and detailed logging. Branch managers received performance evaluations based partly on customer experience metrics across all demographic groups. The updated We See You commercial now featured the same footage of Elijah with his piggy bank, but added a commitment statement about equal treatment and verification standards that applied to all customers. It wasn't just marketing anymore, it was a public pledge. I returned to the branch to finalize my refinancing and barely recognized the place. The physical features were the same marble floors, same counters, same lighting, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Margaret, the elderly former bank teller, smiled as she completed a transaction with the new staff. "About time banks learned some manners," she murmured to me as I waited in line. "In my day, we knew customers by name, not by profile." For viewers wanting practical advice, keep torn check pieces in a Ziploc bag, record timestamps, send evidence, preservation notices, avoid arguments at the counter, and file CFPB complaints if necessary. Evidence trumps emotion every time. Walter had been promoted to facilities supervisor, his observational skills now valued rather than ignored. Sophia was working directly with community organizations to ensure marketing campaigns reflected authentic experiences. Even Richard had found redemption as a trainer in the new verification protocols, his mistake transformed into a powerful teaching tool. After 90 days, complaint rates at the branch had dropped by 72%. A 24/7 hotline was operational, and Dominic had been promoted to customer advocacy specialist, helping train new staff on respectful verification procedures. I spent years in war zones learning to distinguish actual threats from prejudice, he explained during a community banking seminar. Those skills translate perfectly to banking security. Benjamin implemented quarterly compliance audits that included mystery shoppers from diverse backgrounds, ensuring that policies were applied consistently across all customer demographics. Compliance isn't just about following rules, he told industry colleagues at a conference. It's about living values. Victoria spearheaded a broader reform across the regional branches, using the lessons learned to prevent similar issues elsewhere. Her career, rather than being damaged by the incident, flourished as she became known for crisis transformation. Sometimes our greatest professional growth comes from our most uncomfortable moments, she reflected. I witnessed Jasmine walking out with Elijah one afternoon, his face lighting up when he saw himself on the screen. At 8 years old, he didn't fully understand the significance of what had happened, but he absorbed the most important lesson: his mother had stood up for what was right, and the world had changed just a little in response. They see us now, honey, she told him. Because today, Mom didn't turn anger into noise, she turned it into documentation. Kevin's live stream had gone viral, accumulating over 2 million views and sparking discussions about banking practices nationwide. He'd leveraged his unexpected fame into a channel dedicated to consumer rights with Jasmine as an occasional guest expert. First Capital Trust, after initial stock turbulence, found that their transparent response and meaningful reforms actually improved their market position. Trust, it turned out, was good for business. The most significant change wasn't in policies or procedures, but in consciousness. Both customers and employees now move through the space with greater awareness, not hypervigilance or suspicion, but a shared commitment to seeing each other as fully human. Have you experienced banking while different? Share your story below. Subscribe to Black Stories Box next week. Hotel says no vacancy to the hotel owner. My name is Marcus Reynolds, and that's how I saw justice served at First Capital Trust. Not with shouting, not with threats, but with evidence, patience, and the unstoppable power of being right. In a world where institutions often seem immovable, Jasmine showed that one person with truth on their side can create ripples that become waves. Not through violence or vengeance, but through something more powerful: the simple, persistent demand to be seen, really seen, as a full and equal human being. And sometimes that's enough to change everything.